use this time wisely. I'm watching like some of my Facebook feed, people like, what's the next series on Netflix? Like they're literally just Netflix binging like all day long and for the entirety of the week. That's not going to make you better after this blows past. That's not going to make you more money. That's not going to give you a much more secure financial future, right? Use this time wisely while you have it.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association, providing benefits and services to real estate investors and rental property owners for over 48 years. With your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group.
This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. Hello and welcome to episode 221. I hope all of you are safe and healthy. Here in Michigan, we are on lockdown. And wherever you are in the world, I hope you're doing well and taking this coronavirus pandemic seriously. There is no way to discuss real estate right now without admitting that every asset class will be impacted heavily. Today, I'm talking with Kevin Bupp about his investments in mobile home parks, apartments, offices, single-family homes, and parking lots across the United States to find out how he believes they'll hold up in this new economic reality. And because we haven't discussed parking lots yet on this show before, I really want to find out more about that asset class as well. Kevin is the founder and CEO of Sunrise Capital Investors, and he has over 16 years of experience and over 100 million in transactions. He teaches others how to invest in mobile home parks through his Mobile Home Academy, and he also hosts the very popular podcast, the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. If you're looking for a deep dive into the ins and outs of mobile home park investing, you can listen to my previous conversation with Kevin on episode 181 of this show. Kevin, it's great to have you back.
Brian, glad to be here. Thanks for having me back.
So much has changed since you were on the show before. We are recording this March 25th. Here in Michigan, we're probably about a week and a half into our self-quarantining stage. I know you're in Florida. Tell us what's going on, what your on-the-ground perspective is.
Yeah, I mean, as far as here in Florida, it's somewhat not business as usual at all. I don't think it is anywhere across the country. We are not in a state of lockdown. It's you're supposed to be self-quarantining and, basically no gatherings larger than 10 people. Restaurants have been shut down with the exception of takeout and what have you. But, it's surely not business as usual. Schools are shut down and we've got the kids at home and trying to manage, a working household with a 3 and a 6-year-old running around. So that's been quite interesting. My wife and I have been taking shifts on that, just ensuring that we can still get work done and still focus on the kids and ensure that they continue learning, while they're out of the normal school system. So, but, we've got beautiful weather down here. I'm incredibly grateful for where we live. We got beautiful weather. I've been getting my exercise in the morning and it's pleasant enough to hang out outside. And so I feel like we're pretty lucky given the circumstances.
That's great to hear you're staying healthy and exercising. I think that's so important during these times. Tell us what the conversations have been like between you and your team, especially your mobile home park team, because you're in a demographic where you really do have to consider that a lot of your residents aren't going to be able to pay next month.
Yeah, no, you make a great point. And I think that, that demographic is very similar to the demographic that exists in a lot of C and B grade apartment assets as well. And so, it's a very unique time across the country because I think that this isn't just a real estate specific issue. I mean, it's a across all boards industry issue. It's affecting every different type of business that's out there today. There's a few that are thriving because of it, but the majority, I'd say, are feeling a significant impact. I forget when the news came out. It's probably been about 2 weeks ago. I'm losing track of the days here, Brian, literally day by day, forgetting what day it is of the week and just, trying to stay privy to the news and all the updates that are coming out while we also focus on running our business, right? That we have an active, breathing entity, multiple entities that need our attention. And so we're trying to be strategic with all the new developments that are coming out and making sure that we are essentially planning for worst case scenarios. We want to surely hope for the best. The stimulus package just got passed. I think it's getting signed today. And I haven't read through the new revised version of it. So I'm going to hope that a lot of our residents will get the financial support, at least temporary financial support that they need to hopefully abate any massive, delinquency across the board throughout our communities and all the other rental communities that are out there in the country. And so, the news came out a couple weeks ago that the country was essentially going to halt evictions. Now, that news was very specific to Fannie, Freddie, and HUD properties. However, when that news came out, what I feel occurred were a majority of rental, tenants and rental properties just assumed it was a broad blanket statement across the board that essentially, folks don't have to pay rent during this current economic state. And I'm making assumptions here by feeling that way. However, in my mind, that's a worst case scenario. And so what we've been doing over the last couple of weeks is really planning for that worst case scenario. Like what if that is the mindset of either a portion or potentially all of our resident bases throughout our different communities that we own throughout different states. And so we wanted to get out in front of it. A lot of people are taking different approaches. Some are just kind of waiting to see what the fallout might be come, the first week of April or by the second week of April, who hasn't paid and, what are their unique challenges. And we felt that it was going to be much better to be proactive and actually start a line of communication with the residents, but not just openly communicate with them, educate them, state by state specifically, what's happening in their individual state per the eviction laws, per the courts, per the resources that are available locally to them that could assist them, with financial needs as far as helping them with rent payments, helping them with food, what have you. And so we've just created an open line of communication, and we've been doing it now for the past now about a week and a half. And in addition to open line of communication, what we felt that it was necessary to do is really put some protocols in place to essentially help those that we ultimately know are going to be needed. No matter what the stimulus package is, no matter what local financial resources are available to them, there's still going to be some drastic fallout as a direct impact of this, COVID-19 coronavirus economic state that we're in. And so, we one of the things that we've done internally is we've put literally a dedicated person on our team, set up a phone number. We called it the COVID-19 hotline. And this is literally any time of day, someone will answer that phone. And it's specifically for tenants so that if they've got a financial issue, if something happened, they know they're not going to be able to pay rent, they can call and we will literally initiate a workout plan right then and there on the spot with them to ensure that they can stay in their home, keep the roof over their head, and keep their family safe and warm during these crazy times that we're in.
So what are you finding so far with your tenants? Are you getting a lot of calls?
No one knows yet. Yeah, no, I can't say that we're getting. No, we're not. We're not getting a lot of calls, which concerns me. And it concerns me because I feel like we're so early into this. Everyone that has lost a job, the one thing they do know is that they've lost a job, and but I think it takes a little bit of time for it to really sink in. I think everyone feels pain in a different way, and some people can look forth to the future and actually see what's about to play out based on their current circumstances. Some people have to be in those current circumstances to really feel the pain. So I feel as though, and I hope I'm wrong, I feel as though that we're going to see a significant uptick as we turn over to the first of the month here, moving into the month of April. And again, I hope I am wrong. However, that's just my general assumption based on the demographic that we serve. I know what their employment base is for the most part across the board. It varies, but generally speaking, we've got a lot of workforce housing, and we have folks that work in factories, that work in the service industry, that work in retail locations. And we know that pretty much all those industries are being impacted significantly today. And how does that not trickle down to our tenant base? And so I know the facts that are out there. And even if we're not getting calls, I'm assuming that the worst is going to play out.
We've been dealing with this as well on the multifamily side, because we know that our residents are going to be in the same situation. We have a lot of B and C type properties, and our residents are being affected by loss of income. But you have to strike a balance between compassion and actually trying to get paid. So I'm wondering how are you striking that balance in your communication with your residents?
Yeah, we tried to take a very compassionate yet stern approach. And so going back to the education side, now I'll use an example of New York State. New York State, this is we own a couple communities in New York State. And this is one instance where literally 2 weeks ago, New York, the state, passed a moratorium on evictions. I think originally it was a 90-day moratorium on evictions. I don't know if it's been revised since then. And literally within a day, we got an email from the president of the association of one of those two communities that we have there, basically misinterpreting, what announcement had been just made by the governor there of New York related to the moratorium on evictions. And how I read into that was that basically she was spreading, she was going to spread the news to the residents that if they do have financial hardships, don't worry because we will not be able to evict them. And so as I read deeper into that temporary law that had been passed, I read into it and I got some verification from a couple of New York attorneys as well, real estate attorneys, that although there's a moratorium on evictions, the actual courts still were accepting filings. And so basically you could file, it just was going to get put on hold and basically put in line until the courts opened back up and resumed. And so ideally you would want to be in line and not wait 3 months to file. Otherwise you're going to be literally thousands of filings behind everyone else. And so we went as far as educating them in a very compassionate yet stern manner that this surely does not give you the right to not pay your rent. I mean, this is we're in this together as a community. This is not landlord versus tenant, tenant versus landlord. This is a situation where if we're not willing to work through this together, our obligations will get out in front of us. And ultimately this community could be in a much worse, position altogether, meaning that if we can't pay our mortgages, we can't pay our bills, our taxes, which again, it's hard to say that to a tenant to where they don't feel the big bad landlord, the rich guy that's got this big property. It's hard to send that message to them to where they also feel compassion for the situation that we're in. However, we're trying to address it in a way that, hey, we're in this together. We're here to work with you. This does not give you the right not to pay rent. However, if you're having a financial challenge, please reach out to us and we'll work through it together. We are requiring proof that they are having a financial challenge directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic that's going on. So they've got to provide us with either a letter from their employer that they've been laid off or furloughed or lost their job, application for unemployment, even as much as a bank statement. We're looking for something that is proof that they're just not necessarily taking advantage of the system and using this as an excuse to not pay their rent. And so we kind of have a 3-step process. We had a letter that just went out recently to all of our residents that gave them a lot of local resources, a directory of nonprofits and what have you that can help them with their rent payment, food banks that can provide them with food should they have a challenge feeding their family, and also education based on the state that they're in on the current eviction status and if there's a moratorium and what that means. And for those that don't proactively reach out to us and have not paid us by the 5th of the month, which is typically our grace period. So April 5th, typically on the 6th, we hand out demand notices. We've agreed as a company that we're not going to hand out the typical legal demand notice. What we're going to do, it's a little bit softer of a demand notice and it's basically a reiteration of the letter that we just recently sent out, providing resources, what have you. But included in that letter is a very stern paragraph that states, again, this does not provide the right to not continue paying rent. We will basically take it upon ourselves to take legal action should you not directly reach out to us and communicate if you're having financial challenges. I butchered the wording there. It's not exactly what it says, but essentially we're trying to get them to reach out to us. Those that do not proactively reach out to us after that second attempt, 5 days later, they'll get a real demand notice and we will, move forward with the legal eviction process, or at least depending on the state it's in, we'll at least get in line to ensure that when this all clears up, we can move forward with business as usual. My hopes are that when these residents, if they sign up for a payment plan, and part of the agreement that they have to sign with us after they prove that they're having financial hardships due to the COVID-19, part of the agreement on that payment plan is that should they receive funds from the economic stimulus that's being given out by the government, that money will be used first and foremost for any back due rents that are owed prior to any other priorities that they might have on their plate at that given time. Again, we can't enforce that. It's just getting them to put that in writing and commit that they're going to work with us, we're going to work with them. We'll see how that plays out, but these are the necessary steps that we feel are needed to align ourselves with the residents, knowing that we're here to work with them. We're not here to work against them. We're in this together as a team. We're feeling the pain just as much as you. And so let's fight through this together as a collective community.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. What other levels of thinking are you going through with your team as far, maybe, obviously you have the residents and whether or not they're going to pay. What other concerns do you have? And then I want to get to what is there any optimism in your outlook?
There's always optimism. We'll get to that though after I answer your first question. A couple of the other things that we've done. We debated over this for probably about a week, and finally made the decision about 2 days ago that we were going to also halt the distributions to our investors. We had a fairly substantial distribution that was set to go out on the 15th of April, and we've communicated with our investors. We've kept them in the loop very intensely here over the last couple of weeks as we've thought through this entire process, and we've accepted their feedback of the matter and have decided that we're going to halt distributions, which was it was very well received. We didn't know exactly how the masses were going to receive it. However, it's been very well received, and we feel as a whole that it's the most prudent decision to make given the circumstances and lack of clarity that we have of how this is all going to shake out here over the coming months. So again, we're essentially hoarding cash. We're keeping distributions. We've stopped all non-essential CapEx and maintenance projects. So renovations, road work, tree work, any type of improvements whatsoever that are non-essential, we've immediately put a halt on. We did that about a week ago. And so we're trying to basically keep as much cash in the coffers as possible, for a rainy day that might come here in the coming weeks and months. One of the other things that we've proactively done is we began reaching out to our different lenders. We've got many different types of loans on our books. We've got CMBS securitized loans. We've got bank loans. We've got currently have one bridge loan, and then we have Fannie loans. The Fannie loans are pretty Fannie and Freddie. The government has pretty much stepped up with Fannie, Freddie, and HUD, and has already put together a forbearance program. And so I'm not too worried about the Fannie loan. I think they've got a 2-month forbearance program. Granted, the landlord agrees to not evict any tenants within that. I think it's 2 months or 3 months. It's one of the two. I can't recall. So I'm not too concerned there. However, we've got securitized loans. We've got the bridge loan, and we also have bank loans. And so we're trying to be proactive. We're not, we've got a good bit of cash reserves, and we can hold tight for quite some time. However, I know that being in a reactive state, trying to get a hold of banks in the next 2 or 3 weeks is going to be much more challenging, because all those that, were procrastinators and find themselves in deeper water are going to be calling their banks, and it's going to be hours upon hours of waiting, trying to get a hold of someone if you can. And so we've been proactive in doing that, just opening a line of communication, make sure that our banks have updated financials from us so that they can easily make a decision should that point in time come where we need them to either make a loan modification or a forbearance agreement, what have you. Again, not sure exactly how it's all going to play out, but just trying to cover all of our bases, really.
Even the lenders are trying to play catch up right now. I don't think they're clear on what the process is going to be.
No, it's kind of back to, I remember back in 2008, back when the crisis happened back then, banks didn't even have a loss mitigation department. They didn't have a workout department, and it was complete catastrophe as these banks basically had to build out an entire different division of their business. They were not ready for the mass onslaught that came their way of defaults. And so I think the same thing's happening right now from a customer service standpoint, right? They're having to ramp up, just basically to be available to answer questions from borrowers. And they sure as heck don't have their ducks in a row as far as, a mass forbearance or loan mitigation or a rearrangement program like Fannie, Freddie, and HUD does. So, again, we'll see how it plays out. I think that time will tell. A lot has transpired over the past week even. And I think even more is going to take place over this coming week as we move deeper and deeper into this period of a not necessarily national lockdown, but a national, quarantine and what have you. But through all this, Brian, I think the most important part, and it kind of brings me back to how I kind of mentally worked through things in 2008 and in the following years. That was a very challenging time for me. It was the first time I'd ever gone through a period like that. And so I was not prepared either, emotionally, mentally, financially, and ran into quite a great deal of financial challenges with that crash of that market. And then also even emotionally for a couple of years, it was a very challenging time for me to accept what had happened and to kind of move on and get more into an optimistic state and realize that I was missing opportunities as I was kind of sticking my head in the sand. And so what I always vowed to never do again was just that. And so as this has started playing out over the last couple of weeks, not only have we been strategizing with our team about how we're going to manage our current business arrangement, as far as staff, as far as remote work arrangements, as far as our tenant base, what have you, our investors. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces there. We've also been thinking about, the future, not just working in a state of fear, worrying about COVID-19, but we know this will pass as with everything else. And we want to be prepared coming out on the other side to hit the ground running again. And I mean, we're real estate investors. We're not in this to, in for the short term. We're not in this just to make it through this COVID-19 thing and then, think that, we're done doing our work. I mean, we're doing our work each and every day. And so behind the scenes, we've been strategizing what those next steps look like. And part of those steps, as you had mentioned in the beginning of the show, are not only mobile home parks, which is by far our asset of choice. We're going to continue buying mobile home parks. But in addition to that, one of the asset classes that we have been studying feverishly for the past year and a half, but even more intensely for the past 6 months, really putting a plan together to roll out, a future investment vehicle is parking lots, surface parking lots of parking garages. So we've been putting all the work in behind the scenes so that here in the coming months, we can get rolling and actually start getting back in acquisition mode with not only mobile home parks, but also parking assets across the country.
Why parking lots? Now, that's an interesting asset class. I actually know someone who invests quite successessfully in parking lots, but we've never talked about it on this show. I'm curious, what has brought that to your attention?
I have to give credit to my podcast. So, my Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Throughout the 6 years I've been doing it, I've had some very unique real estate investors on the show. And, the premise of that show is to essentially expose our listeners to multiple different asset classes in the commercial real estate field. And then you got like the major food groups like retail, office, industrial, and then you got multifamily, what have you. And then you got some niches like self-storage and mobile home parks and, many others. I don't need to go through the entirety of the list. And then you've got some incredibly niche-y asset types, parking lots being one of them. I was introduced to a gentleman about 3.5 years ago, maybe it's even 4 years ago, that he was a broker. He is the largest broker in the parking lot niche across the country. I mean, it's a small niche, and so he was one of the few people that focused in that niche wholeheartedly. And he was, as far as transactions were concerned, he was the largest broker in the country. And so I interviewed him on the show. Was very intrigued with the asset class. We were not at the point in time of our business to really divert, focus, or pivot to an additional asset class. And so it always just stuck in the back of my mind. And I met him a few additional times at conferences, always had good conversations about what it is he did, and was always amazed at how fragmented the asset class was as far as the ownership structures, who the owners were. I was always amazed at the passive nature of the business, low maintenance, what have you. And also on top of that, just the locations where most of these parking assets, at least the ones that we would have an interest in, were located, central business districts and urban type environments, what have you. So, really valuable pieces of land. And last year we got really serious about it. And last year we dove in, head first and studied it, spent hours upon hours, going to conferences and talking to different operators and investors that were in this niche, banks that finance in this niche and what have you. And about 6 months ago, I made the decision to really run towards it full speed ahead. And most of it having to do with, all those things I just mentioned of why we like the asset class, but also there's, at this point, very little competition in that niche, only because it's just it's very contrarian, right? It's very different than what the masses are doing today. And I just don't think that it's really been on the radar of really anyone other than developers, right? Like developers are really our biggest competition, because most of these pieces of property, these parking lots, are in areas to where their current use today is a parking lot. This is assuming it's a surface lot. That is its lowest valued use. It will never, ever carry a use that is lower than that of a parking lot. More than likely, it's going to be redeveloped into something, office, retail, a multifamily at some point in the future, right? Because there's no more land being built, there's no more land being created, especially in densely populated urban environments. And so just it's something that's been on our radar. We're super excited about it. Can't wait to hit the ground running and start buying a bunch of lots across the country.
What are the economics of owning parking lots? I mean, what's the income stream, and how does that compare to the expenses?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it varies from, surface parking lots, very, very low expense load, right? There's not much to them. I mean, it's a piece of, it might not even be paved, for the most part, they're paved asphalt, might have a fence around it, but for the most part, very, very low operational expenses other than, general liability policy, what have you. Garages are a different animal, and I'm not going to even try to speak to garages because it's all across the board as far as the overall expense load. Different markets have different taxes associated with parking and different structures of a very different ages. You might find a parking garage that was built in the 40s, another one built in 1998. Those two are going to carry very different types of CapEx reserves necessary as far as ongoing maintenance as well, based on the type of engineering and building that was used back then, and material, what have you. But as far as surface lots are concerned, the operational expense load is very low. And one of the most attractive elements of parking, this is the part that really struck a chord with us. One of the biggest challenges with our mobile home park business is the operational side. Unlike in multifamily, which is what you're in, Brian, we don't necessarily have the luxury of outsourcing our property management to one of many, regional, national property management companies. Companies that would have the infrastructure they've been doing for years. They would do a way better job than you might managing your 100, 200, 300 unit apartment complex, right? So they're a dime a dozen. That's very much the business model in multifamily, is essentially raise the capital, buy the asset, and essentially just be an asset manager to that property management company. If they don't do a great job, there's another 5 property management companies that would step into their role. In the mobile home park space, that's just not the case. There's a handful of property management companies across the country. We've tested, did a year test last year. It was a very failed test with the largest management company in the country, and it was a miserable experience. And we brought it back in-house last November. And so we've essentially had to build a full-fledged property management company, which is a legitimate business in and of itself, with lots of staff, lots of payroll, what have you. And so it's very hard to scale that business simultaneously. As you buy assets, if you wanted to buy 5 assets, especially if they've got a value add component, you've got to basically staff up the property management side. And until you get to a certain scale, that property management side is not profitable. And so you're bleeding over here while you're buying over here. And there's a lot of conflict that exists between those two businesses in order to build a large mobile home park investment business. Okay, so the one part that we don't like about it, getting back to it, is the operational side and the lack of scalability, especially when we are a little bit smaller in size. Parking lots, on the other hand, the beautiful thing about this niche is that, number one, I'll speak to the fragmentation of ownership. 70% of parking lots, aside from ones that are owned by municipalities, so 70% of parking lots, 70% of parking lot owners only own one parking lot or garage, parking structure, meaning that a lot of these are mom and pops. A lot of them are mom and pops that just happen to have a piece of land. They've been using as parking. Maybe their son-in-law runs it. He collects the money, or he's got a guy sitting underneath the umbrella, or maybe he's got some technology that's kind of running the show and accepting credit cards, what have you. But most of them, have been in families for many, many years. And so that's a beautiful thing to us, is that in my mind, that means opportunity. To me, parking lots are where self-storage and mobile home parks were like 20 years ago, as far as a fragmentation or consolidation structure. They're not consolidated. It's not one big company that owns 50% of the market, what have you. Another beautiful part of this business is that about 99% of the folks that are in this business, from an operational perspective, don't own the real estate, meaning that there's a litany of local, regional, and national, even publicly traded parking lot management companies. They call them operators. but they don't own the real estate. They just manage the parking lots. And one of the primary business models is, I'm a parking lot owner. I've got an operator here that specializes in, Baltimore, Maryland, running parking facilities. That parking lot operator will essentially sign a 5 or 10 year double or triple net lease, depending on the circumstances, on that parking lot. And typically those leases have 2 to 3% escalators each and every year. What that means for being a parking lot owner is you do nothing. I mean, you do very, very little. It's equal. I like to compare it to, buying a triple net Walgreens or CVS or Starbucks, or, basically a triple net retail facility, to where the tenant typically will take care of practically everything. Again, there's double net arrangements where, we might have to maintain the actual structure, what have you, but the operations day to day, everything is managed by the management company. They pay us a set amount each and every month. And so to us, what that meant was that we could basically add on to our portfolio in an asset class that we love, and not have to build out additional infrastructure on the operation side. We don't have to build a property management company to manage parking assets across the country. We don't have to hire another staff member. We just have to find the assets and raise the capital for them, make sure we get, good, prudent assets, raise the capital, purchase them, and essentially find the best operator in class in that market and let them lease it from us and go find the next one. That's what we love about the space.
This is more of a land play then.
This is a cash flow covered land play. Cash flow covered land play. Yeah,
I like that. Cash flow covered land play.
The secret here. So as I had mentioned, the most parking lots in this country, if they're in CBD locations, central business districts, downtown, a lot of them might already have a higher and better use. And so what the value is today, even if it's a cash flowing parking lot, it might have a higher value already as something else, meaning that it would be very challenging to buy that as a covered land play unless you were a developer and you planned on developing it like the next 3 years. Then maybe you'd be able to offset some of your cost in the interim until you're ready to actually go vertical with it. Our intent's not to go vertical with anything. That doesn't mean 10 years from now we wouldn't JV with a developer or what have you. Our goal is to find parking lots that are kind of in a not a transitionary area, but that's going already through regentrification, that's already got a demand factor to it, that's already being used as a parking lot, but doesn't have a higher and better use yet, but is very close, so that we can buy as a parking lot and essentially get in there at the right price and enjoy cash flow until that intrinsic value of that parking lot goes higher based on its future land use or future higher and better use. I'll give you an example of a parking lot we have in contract right now. It's in Wilmington, North Carolina, downtown Wilmington, North Carolina. Phenomenal market, just incredibly busy. It's thriving. Lots of new multifamily development, lofts going up, tons of restaurants. It's a little waterfront district. And we have a parking lot in contract. It's a small one. It's a signalized corner though. It's right in the heart of downtown, right on Restaurant Row. Again, hard intersection with a traffic light there. It's 24, 25 spaces in total. It's a doctor that owns it. He's owned it for 10 years. He's currently leasing it to a local mom and pop company that has been, paying him, I think, like $2,700 a month for the past, 5-6 years. And to him, that's great based on what he paid for it, whatever, 10, 11, 12 years ago. We know the main operator in Wilmington. We know that the guy that runs the majority of the parking down there, like very professional company. He's got, tons of technology. Basically, he's got dynamic pricing models. He can make sure that he's getting the highest dollar amount per hour for any lot in Wilmington. There's a few lots that aren't managed by him. This is one of them. And we went to him and he basically gave us a proposal of he would pay us $75,000 a year with 3% escalators on a 10-year lease. We just tied up this parking lot for $695,000, which to the seller is a great deal for him. It's a horrible deal for us. It equates to like a 5 cap. I mean, it wouldn't make sense. However, based on an LOI that we already have in place from a new operator, knowing what the real value of that parking lot is and what they can really do once they put some technology in place, it's a 10 cap or slightly better than a 10 cap. It's a phenomenal deal. So there's a lot of mom and pop kind of run operations like that just they're not even utilizing technology to ensure that they're getting the most dollars or most bang for their buck as far as parking is concerned, even in its current state as a parking lot.
I'd like to get a sense of the numbers here.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you talk about multifamily, you talk about your income and expenses per unit. When you talk about retail or office, it's income and expenses per square foot.
Hmm.
What does that look like with parking? And give us some specific numbers on
Yeah.
how to break down.
So this would be a single net lease. So we're actually we're going to be responsible for the maintenance and then also the taxes and insurance on this property. Okay, it's an asphalt parking lot. It's got a wrought iron gate around it. It's the asphalt's in really good condition. We don't, it doesn't need anything today at all. It's already striped over the last couple of years, what have you. The general liability policy runs about $6,000 a year, and the taxes on that piece of property, they're currently the assessment is a little lower. We're going to try to, we haven't closed. We're going to try to do an allocation to, hopefully not get reassessed or get a major impact. But even if they doubled, they would only go up to about $6,000 a year. Right now, they're I think about $3,400 a year. So, as far as other expenses associated with it on our side, there's nothing.
What does that expense ratio look like? Is it like in the 30% range?
As far as setting aside reserves for future improvements to the asphalt, what have you, I'd say it's closer to about 10%.
That's an incredible
Yeah.
expense ratio. I mean, in apartments, you're
Yeah.
usually a 50, 60% expense ratio. Self-storage, which I also invest in, it's usually around 35%, give or take. So 10% is phenomenal.
Well, you got to think there's no we don't have payroll associated with it. It's literally a lot. It's a corner lot that has asphalt on it. So even then, it's a small piece of property. Even if we had to repave it, to repave that would only cost $10,000. I mean that's I know the price of asphalt because we've repaved many roads over the years, and so we could repave that entire parking lot and restripe it for $10,000. And so there's not much else outside of about the only there's obviously risk associated with it. There's some unknowns. One would be some cities across the U.S. Have enacted a very high parking taxes. Wilmington, North Carolina does not have a specific parking tax. Downtown Baltimore has one. It's like 20%. It's crazy. And there's some other, downtown Chicago, I think it's like 25%. I mean, it's ludicrous. So, in the event they were to pass some type of legislation that enacted, a parking tax specifically on parking structures, lots and garages, that could make an impact to future cash flow. So there's some risk associated with it as far as like unknowns, expenses that might come our way. But generally speaking today, and I don't want to paint a broad brushstroke across all surface lots that, you're going to be looking at a 10% expense ratio. That's just not the case. But for this specific one, it's very much in line with right around 10%. The taxes are fairly low in North Carolina. If you get into a different market where the property taxes are much higher or insurance is higher, what have you, once you get into a parking garage, you're going to be looking at much higher expense ratios due to taxes, insurance, and just ongoing maintenance with the structure itself. But surface parking lots, there's not much to it. It's very little.
What kind of technology do you bring to these? Because I'd imagine if they're mom and pop owned, there's really no gates, electronic gates, or automatic payment type systems. What do you are you the one investing into that technology, or is it just the management team that you bring in?
Yeah, it's negotiable. It's a great question. That's negotiable, but normally it's the management company. Now, if you're only going to sign like a 1-year lease with them, they're surely not going to go invest, $10, $15, $20,000 in technology if you're not going to commit to a long-term lease. However, given the circumstances of a long-term lease, and they're going to basically manage that asset for quite some time to come, they typically will put the investment into place. And it really depends on the size of that investment. Speaking to the surface lot here, really what they would put is one pay station, a digital pay station that is solar powered. So there's no electrical infrastructure that would have to be run. I believe, if I recall, the cost of such a standalone pay tower was right around $7,000. In addition to that, they would put in a bunch of signage throughout the the parking lot. So maybe tack on another $1,000 for signage. And then on this one, it's got a wrought iron gate already. It does not have or it's got a wrought iron fence. It does not have a gate at the entrance. More than likely, they probably will put a gate in, which I don't know if we'll pay for or they'll pay for. But even then, the gate probably will run about $8,000 to $9,000. So. But for the most part, as far as the equipment's concerned, normally the management company, assuming they're going to sign a lease with us, would put that in, and they would own it, though. And so when that lease ends, they would take it with them.
Now, I know you have a system when it comes to mobile home parks for finding those mom and pop operators who are looking to retire and sell. Is it a similar system for finding these parking lots?
Yeah, it is. It makes it a little more challenging. Mobile home parks, same thing. You can't just go buy a list of all the mobile home parks. There's no system like a CoStar that has it nice and neatly compiled for us to go in and dissect. And so we've got a team behind the scenes, just like we did with mobile home parks, that are databasing strategic market locations, essentially, all the surface parking lots and garages in that respective locale, digging into the entity, if there is one, Secretary of State website, find out who the members are of the LLCs and entities, getting their phone numbers, mailing addresses, what have you. And it's basically going to be an outbound marketing push, just like we had done in the past with mobile home parks. And that's really where we shine. We're really good at going direct to owner. That's where we bought, I guess 85% of the assets we own today have been direct to owner. Not that I don't love brokers, I do, and we do utilize them. It just allows us to eliminate a lot of the competition of something going to the mass marketplace when we get to it first.
Well, Kevin, as we wrap it up here, I know that you went through something very similar in 2008, a lot of uncertainty, economic panic, what have you. What advice do you have for our listeners as we wrap it up that you can give them that they can take away and maybe use to help propel them further when it comes to real estate investing?
This circumstance has got some, various differences than 2008. One being that the majority of the country is kind of locked inside right now, and without an unknown future of when the quarantine is going to end. And so I think one of the big things is use this time wisely. I'm watching like some of my Facebook feed, people like, what's the next series on Netflix? Like they're literally just Netflix binging like all day long and for the entirety of the week. That's not going to make you better after this blows past. That's not going to make you more money. That's not going to give you a much more secure financial future, right? Use this time wisely while you have it. No longer are there excuses of, I don't have time to work out. I don't have time to read a book. I don't have time to listen to a podcast. You've got all the time in the world. At least the majority of you that are listening, you got all the time in the world right now, unless you're playing, damage control in your portfolio. But even then, like I said, we're doing that. And we're also really thinking about next steps, what the future holds for us. And so, simply put, Brian, use the time wisely, make yourself better, self-help books, you spend time meditating, get that exercise in, and just be prepared for what's going to come our way, both the good and the bad, right? There's going to be bumps down this road that we're traveling together. But once you get past those bumps, there's also going to be opportunities that you can take advantage of. Not take advantage, but there's going to be opportunities to be had from the unfortunate folks that couldn't make it past the bumps, right? And you want to be ready for it. And I can tell you that I was not ready for that in 2010 and 11. I missed a ton of opportunities, but I can promise you that I'm keeping my mind straight, and I'm keeping healthy, and I'm keeping focused so that we can, capitalize on some of that transfer of wealth that I believe is going to occur here in the coming year or two.
How would people get a hold of you or find out more about you?
The best way to reach me is my website, kevinbupp.com. On that website, you can listen to episodes of my two different podcasts I have. You can also learn about our investment company, which is Sunrise Capital Investors. There's a link there to that. And you can also find me on the different social media platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn. I do not have a Twitter page yet, but Facebook or LinkedIn, either one of those, you can track me down. So I'm not too hard to find.
All right. Well, Kevin, it's been a great conversation talking about parking lots and also just your perspective on the economic tsunami that we're going through and how you're preparing for it with your team and your mobile home parks. It's been really instructive and helpful to hear your take and how you're working through this. So thank you very much for sharing it with us. It's been a great conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on, Brian. And thank you for all you do for the audience here, all the folks that you help with your message that you put out each and every week. So I know how much work it goes into putting these podcasts together. And so thank you for all you do for everyone that's out there in the world.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group. And you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's higinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.